Good evening, dear friends. We meet again. In the middle of all this madness, being locked in, locked out, locked down, we can move, we cannot move, masks on, masks off. I started wondering in the last couple of weeks, is this virus story a cover-up for something else? And I found many elements of the puzzle. I don't have everything, but I have many elements of the puzzle that could indicate that maybe this is a cover-up for a grab of our houses, our properties. Basically, the idea of private property being grabbed by whatever new world order wants to be there. So I'll explore with you 5 main questions tonight so that everybody can make their own assessment of the situation and be aware and inform others. The 5 facts. The first fact: is there a massive debt built up by European countries? Are European countries building an amount of debt that cannot be repaid ever? Because who's going to pay for this debt and how? The second question: are governments working on something called the UBI, Universal Basic Income, which sounds like a nice idea, so everybody can get money even if you're not working, but how and who will pay for it, we don't know yet. Third fact: is the Irish government considering modifications in the constitutions in relation to the constitutional protection for private property? We'll have a look at that. Fourth point: does the Health Act March 2020 allow anybody to be detained only on suspicion of the virus? So somebody can come to your house on orders of a medical doctor and just arrest you and take you out. Fifth point: are they building isolation centers all over the place in every country? And why are these? So these are the things that we're going to be considering tonight together, and everybody will make up their own opinion. Against my job here is to share these facts with you. There are already some doctors, some politicians, normal people going to the street, showing their concern, voicing their concern. There are enough elements for everybody to question what is happening around us at the moment, and to question the official story that there's a virus and this is what this is happening for. As I mentioned, I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, but I have enough facts to share with you so that everybody make their opinion and can act accordingly. The first point I'll discuss with you today is the massive debt. As you can see in the graph that we are seeing at the moment, every country has gone for massive debt. I'm talking about the case of Europe because this is the one that I know most. As you can see in these graphs, some countries have gone to 10% debt over GDP. Now, in the past, when the 2010 crisis happened, if you went beyond the 3% deficit over GDP, so basically your yearly deficit, not debt, deficit over GDP was above 3%, there was a massive financial crisis, political crisis, people were arguing, governments were not agreeing. So now what happened? They all went mad. You can see Spain at 12%, Italy at 11%, Belgium 10%, France at 10%. So in certain cases, the deficit is tenfold what it was before, 10 times more. This is massive for a virus. This is massive. This is much, much, much more than we lived in the financial crisis before in 2010 in any country. So what happened now? How come nobody's complaining about this? How come the IMF or anybody's not complaining about it? Normally, the regulators, the central banks, the finance ministers, the governments, they put this in check. Nobody's putting it in check. So there's like a mad explosion of deficit without any control in all the main countries. And today, even countries like Greece or Portugal are good students in comparison with the others. And usually they were supposed to be the bad ones in Europe in terms of not controlling the deficits. This is pure madness. This is pure madness. That's the first question. Who's going to pay for this? It might be like 50,000 or 100,000 per person at the end of all of this. It would be our children, it would be ourselves. You have to ask yourself the question. That was the first point. The second point, introducing of the UBI. So the UBI is a very interesting idea that was introduced and has been discussed recently during the pandemic, but nobody heard about it because we're all focused on what? We're all focused on masks and lockdowns and masks. And there's hysteria and madness about it. And all the doctors are coming in saying that there's nothing so dangerous, why are we doing all of that? It's all being overemphasized. In the meantime, Here I have a text from the Basic Income Ireland. Basic income is available in every country. It's the idea of giving you a minimum salary even if you don't work. It's nirvana, right? You don't work and you just get money. It sounds great. And what is interesting is the lady's name is Anne Ryan, and she's a joint coordinator at Basic Income Ireland. And she's saying the COVID-19 pandemic has shown the need for bold, innovative thinking in order to provide security and stability for all members of societies. So because of COVID, now we know that we need to help each other. Before that, we did not need that. Because of COVID, we need to think about the basic income for everybody. Before, we don't need them. It doesn't sound right, does it? We all know what we need. We did not need the COVID for that. You know what I mean? So they are saying that we would like to see this commitment to introduce a full permanent basic income for all within the next 5 years. This is a lovely idea. But who's going to finance it? I would like to have free money. Where it's going to come from, that free money? You have to start thinking. And what's the point of giving us money if we're going to just stay at home and be lazy? So I just stay at home and you pay me? Is the present lockdown some kind of psychological setup to put me already into that? That I'm at home, I'm forced to be at home, and I receive a salary. Are they already programming me to come to this kind of situation? I don't know. Ask yourself the question. The next point to analyze is the project on the referendum of housing. So if I refer to this article from the Irish Times on the 22nd of June, they were saying there's a scope for ambitious legislative reform on housing within existing constitutional parameters. Why would there be a referendum of housing, is asking the journalist. The journalist is asking himself, why do we need a referendum on housing? Yeah, because the government seems to have a program for a referendum on housing to consider different things that is very vague. And one of the approaches they discuss, as per the article, alternative approaches might seek to remove perceived constitutional barriers to housing reform. Sounds good. For example, by abolishing constitutional protection for property rights. Interesting. For example, by abolishing constitutional protection for property rights. I repeat, abolishing constitutional protection for property rights. What does that mean? That means that they are investigating different ways of changing this constitution. But today, if the government wants to expropriate me or anybody, they don't need to change the constitution. They can come, they can take your house and say, we have to build a housing estate and we need to take your house out, and they give you some money. The only reason they want to change it, or they might want to change it, is because they don't want to give you money. They want to come and they want to take your housing and say, we are taking it and that's that, and there's no compensation. Because you might get the universal basic income, because of other reasons. I don't know. Ask yourself the question. Ask yourself the question, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Is it to fund the deficit that we're going through? Or to fund the UBI? I don't know. Ask yourself the question. The next point we go on to is the Health Act March 2020. Did you know about this act? I didn't know. I had to research it. So this is the act. It was voted March 2020. It's called the Health Preservation and Protection and Other Emergency Measures in the Public Interest Act 2020 for Ireland. Yeah? And I take from the introduction, it says, to provide for powers for certain medical officers of health to order, so some medical officer of the health will order in certain circumstances the detention of persons who are suspected to be potential sources of infection with the disease known as COVID-19. Wow. So somebody can come and detain me only on suspicion, on just because they suspect something? On suspicion, yeah? So they can come and detect me on suspicion that I have something. Right. That sounds quite scary. Because today, you know how it works. They are using these PCR tests, and most of you know now that most people on PCR tests will show positives. The reason for that is a PCR test, if it's done in a certain way, it will show your status even 5-10 years ago. If you had a cold many years ago and you still have some trace of that in your body, the PCR test will show that you are positive for COVID. So that will be excuse for somebody to come and detain me in my house. I don't even have the disease COVID, but there's a suspicion that they have it. So they come and detain me. Right. So will that be used as an excuse because I refuse to vaccinate, or because I will refuse the universal basic income, or I will refuse to hand up my property or my land? I don't know. You have to ask yourself the question. Why would they allow themselves to come and detain you in your own house for this type of thing, when you are only on suspicion of having something? The whole thing is mad. You have to think about it. Yeah? And the last point I want to make is why they are building these isolation centers. So you can see here, I've put for you the conversation of the member of parliament in the Canada, talking about why they're building isolation centers in Canada. We'll listen to him for a second.
In September, the federal government posted a call for expressions of interest for contractors to supply, provide, and manage quarantine isolation camps throughout every province and every territory in Canada. These quarantine isolation camps, however, are not limited to people with COVID, but provide a wide latitude for many people to be detained. Surely this government is aware of the intentions to build these isolation camps from coast to coast. And my question to the Premier is, how many of these camps will be built, and how many people does this government expect to detain?
Question.
As you can see, the member is actually talking about the fact that they are building centers all over Canada. You only have a small extract of it now, and the rest will be at the end of the video. And he's asking why these detention centers are being built all over the country for long term, not only for quarantine, for long term. And when he's asking the question to know why they're building it and for who, they don't get a straightforward answer. The only response he gets is for safety, for the safety of the people. That's it. For your safety, I'll lock you down. In Ireland, I took two examples. The HSE is quite active. Recently, as you can see, they have acquired the former Cleve Stuffy factory in Limerick, as you can see from the article here. So basically, this facility has been taken for the duration of the pandemic and has been used the site for individuals advised to isolate after contracting the condition. Right. I don't understand why they have to go isolate there when everybody can quarantine in their homes. So then I searched a little bit more, and I found a speech by HSE Executive Paul Reid, as you can see in this paper. The executive says, all across the country we have a number of these centers. Then he says, the vast majority of people don't need hospital or don't need acute care, but they need supports. So that's primarily why these facilities are for. Right. So to support me, you take me out of my home and you're going to isolate me in that center. That's lovely. Doesn't make any sense to me at all. So, lovely people, a lot of information are there. I really engage you to go and check it, analyze it, see what is happening. Many politicians are already starting to worry about the fact that this is not a very democratic process, what is happening at the moment. Even I'll share with you this now from TD Michael McNamara. As you can see, he is saying that the government planned to roll over all legal restrictions and the power to bring in further restrictions on liberty and livelihood without democratic oversight. It planned to do this next Thursday without any debate on these extraordinary powers. Now a mere 45 minutes only is allowed. This is a profoundly undemocratic and dangerous power grab by the government. So the TD, so the Member of Parliament in Ireland, is saying this is a profoundly undemocratic and dangerous power grab by the government, which will delegitimize the measures introduced. Though restrictions are introduced in many other European states, democratic oversight is retained. So basically, in other countries, they are keeping some oversight, but in Ireland, they don't seem to be doing that. And he says democracy is not the tyranny of the majority. So even if the majority think one way, there has to be debate, there has to be oversight, there has to be engagement. So here you have one TD in Ireland that's talking about this. You have the Member of Parliament from Canada that we mentioned earlier. And both of them disagree with what is going on and are kind of bringing some kind of alarm for people to see. So kind of an alarm bell is ringing for you to wake up. Yeah. So you need to keep an eye on what's going on. As I said, I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, but you have enough elements here to make up your own opinion on what is going on and to start becoming responsible for your own survival. and your own continuation in here, and not give away your responsibility to another. You and me and everybody is personally responsible for our own civil rights and civil liberties and our life on earth as divine beings. So I hope this was helpful for you to wake you up. Few little bullet points. You can check them all. I hope you enjoyed it. Keep connected and keep strong. God bless.
Speaker, my question is to the Premier. In my supplemental question yesterday, I asked this government if the people of Ontario should prepare for internment camps. In September, the federal government posted a call for expressions of interest for contractors to supply, provide and manage quarantine isolation camps throughout every province and every territory in Canada. These quarantine isolation camps, however, are not limited to people with COVID, but provide a wide latitude for many people to be detained. Surely this government is aware of the intentions to build these isolation camps from coast to coast. And my question to the Premier is, how many of these camps will be built, and how many people does this government expect to detain?
Question. Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is very true that when people leave the country and when they come back in, that the province is suggesting, and the federal government, in cooperation with the federal government, we are suggesting that people isolate themselves. That has been a practice that has been very successful, not only here in the province of Ontario, but across Canada. And we will, of course, be redoubling our efforts to make sure that the people of the province of Ontario remain safe, Mr. Speaker. So if the member is referring to the fact that that one of the public health policies is that when you return from a jurisdiction outside of the province of Ontario or from another country, that you isolate yourself for 2 weeks, I would suggest that has been a good policy that has been working. In fact, this House has been doing the same thing since we came back. We are working in cohorts to make sure that the Legislative Assembly can continue to operate. That's why we have 2 separate cohorts, Mr. Speaker.
Response.
With the cooperation of the official opposition, that is why all members of the Independents have been excluded from that cohort, because we want them to be able to participate in debate. So we'll continue to do everything in our power to make sure that this House continues, but that the people of the province of Ontario and Canada are kept safe.
Supplementary question.
Again, back to the Premier. Here's the RFP, and in the RFP it uses clear language to express that these camps can be used for a broad spectrum of people, not limited to travellers. Indeed, it doesn't even mention international travellers. It's just a broad latitude of people. And I'll send over the copy of the RFP after. So your government must be in negotiations and aware of these plans to potentially detain and isolate citizens and residents of our country, in our province. So, Speaker, to the Premier, where will these camps be built? How many people will be detained? And for what reasons?
Question.
For what reasons can people be kept in these isolation camps? And I'd like to have the Premier assure the people of Ontario.
Member, take a seat. The next question